Rated E for everyone, rated by ESRB.
By the way, there's a Pizza Hut that overlooks the pyramids.
That will trump anything you could teach me. That is
Expert versus expert. Dominic, variety streamer.
Hi, my name is Dominic, or Dom Solo on Twitch. I'm a variety streamer, and I play a lot of Microsoft Flight Simulator.
Hi, my name is Rachel, and I'm a CFII and current airline pilot, and you'll find me flying the passenger jet, the Embraer 175.
Streaming flight sim is very rewarding for me. I find it's a great way to kind of talk with my chat and engage with my community a little bit while still doing cool things with them. You know, if they want to say, hey, Dom, take us through France, you know, it's like, cool, let's, you know, I've never been to France. Chat, we're going on a trip to France together.
With gaming with Microsoft Flight Sim, I've actually had dream students that have come in having already played Microsoft Flight Sim, and maybe they're a little behind the airplane in certain aspects that you just can't replicate on a console, but overall they're quite good. They're a lot better than just people that come off the streets, because they at least have a somewhat knowledge of where they are in space. You're learning something as you're moving, but they have the luxury of being able to do it in a chair at home. So they kind of get the basics down, which is, it's really interesting to see. I'm actually really curious to see how the instruments work, if I can do certain maneuvers that I would teach students in the airplane, something like stalls or steep turns, things that you have to do on your check ride. So I'm actually kind of curious to see how that would go. I think the instrumentation is what I'm most looking forward to, which just sounds really nerdy when I think about it.
Dominic versus Rachel, in the flight simulator.
Okay, so the very first thing I do on every single flight is I have to go to third person. I have to. I don't know why. It makes it feel more like a video game and less like a simulator.
Right.
But so as soon as I find that button, everything feels a lot easier.
Okay.
Takes off.
We can give it a little bit of throttle.
There you go.
Plane flies.
For anyone's first takeoff, I never have them rotate a little too early. Usually 60s where I like to wait. There's a little bit of a buffer. And like you just did, just an inch back.
View of the dashboard.
If we want, we could actually hear. We'll kind of see what this looks like in here.
This would actually be very valuable as somebody who's learning about sight picture in smaller airplanes. So in this case, you could see that we're climbing, right? The horizon's below the nose, and you can even use your side windows, which is what I always told students. You could use you could see that we're actually angled up against the horizon. Notice how the tip of the wing, how it's sort of up from the horizon and push the nose forward.
Slanted upward,
so
kind of look like a ramp.
Yeah.
Looks around.
And then level it with the horizon, and that's how you know that you're straight and level.
Forward.
Okay, so now I'm gonna do the exact same takeoff that Dominic just did. We would have...
There's an old saying I like. A mile of road will take you a mile. A mile of runway will take you anywhere.
All right, yeah, thank you. I like her, she's nice.
They smile.
At this point, I would have gotten the ATIS, I would have spoken to ground, and now I am holding short of the runway, ready for takeoff. All right, so now I'm gonna try to stay on center line.
Moves.
We were talking about that little bit of P factor.
Follows a line.
What I always teach students is to always keep their hand on the throttle in case they have to abort takeoff.
Okay.
So obviously, when you're playing in the sim, you're just clicking a little bit of right, a little bit of left, right, to try to stay on center line. But in the real world, you always want your hand by the throttle, just to make sure, you know, in case there's a car, another airplane, whatever it is, that you can actually abort takeoff, or one of your warning lights goes off.
The plane starts bobbing.
But now we're at full power.
The plane takes off gently.
So that's it. That's a nice little takeoff.
The plane elevates.
Now we're gonna get to a little bit more of my favorite part of the game, which is being already in the air.
Fueled up.
Oh,
ready
yeah.
to go.
I mean, you know, being over a really cool place that I have never been. We're gonna go to Giza. We're gonna go to Egypt.
Ooh.
And
Pyramids appear.
That's great.
Yeah, it's great for
Beautiful
sightseeing. So.
At the airlines, it's so task saturated that when you finally get to cruise, you get to feel that, like, it's just quiet.
Yeah, and another reason why I prefer third person is really just because you can kind of see everything.
Great attention to detail, by the way, that they actually changed the noise. That you can hear the outside versus what it's,
a little bit
because
more
that
muffled.
Actually is what it sounds like when you're flying a Cessna around. That's really cool.
I really do like this game because one, it also provides kind of context for everything. It kind of gives a one-to-one scale. Like I wouldn't have known that the pyramids are literally this close to the Sphinx.
By the way, there's a Pizza Hut that overlooks the pyramids.
That will trump anything you could teach me. That is what I'm taking away
Make sure you
from
go
this
to the
entire
Pizza
day.
Hut on the balcony and you'll get the best views of the pyramids. So we are in Giza. I want to see how this little guy maneuvers. On your private pilot check ride, you have to do a 45-degree bank, 2 congruent 360s, and you can only lose 10 knots of airspeed or gain 10 knots of airspeed. You can only lose or gain 100 feet. So I'm going to see how I can do this. So I'm just going to roll into a steep turn. I just want to see how she controls. So I'm going to add a little bit of power, because remember we lose lift in a turn.
Turns.
And then I'm just going to, oh goodness. All right, I'm just going to use, see how the nose is just sort of cutting right through the horizon?
Yes.
See that? See how it's not dipping down.
Tilts.
It's not popping up.
Bobbing.
So there you go. All right, so I didn't lose that much altitude. I'm still at around 1800. So one of the ways that I teach my students about flying straight and level, right, is to look at the horizon. I usually cover up their instrument panel to begin with, just so they can get like, this is what outside looks like. Because right now I can tell we're in a climb.
Sunrise.
Right? The horizon is starting to sink below the nose of the airplane, so I know I'm climbing. I can also look outside on my wing. Notice my wing in relation to the horizon. Notice how it's pitched up ever so slightly. So those are very simple ways to just teach a student, hey, we're in a climb, right? So you can pull some of the power out.
You can also look at the cars and see they're getting smaller.
Or that.
How often do you have to talk about weather for your job?
Every single day. Before you take off and before you land, and then on the way there.
Most times you talk about the weather because you have nothing else to talk about.
Right.
But no, here it's actually, okay.
All right, so the landing, I'm assuming the weather's quite nice. I'm gonna just go ahead and drop all the flaps in. And then I'm just thinking about, all right, I gotta center her over here. Use a little tiny bit of rudder.
Runway.
Again, this is something that you would just learn how to feel in the airplane. Coming in at a nice 60 knots. Still thinking about getting centered, and the airlines I would have gone around by now because this is not a stable approach, but that is okay because we are just talking about the game. All right, so 0-5 centered. All right, so now we're coming in.
The plane lands on the runway.
I'll start my flare right around here. Put a little bit of right rudder just to get over.
Ooh, how smooth.
And then just
Didn't
nice
even
and easy.
skip.
And of course, I mean, if this was an airliner, we would have gone around because we weren't stable coming in, but at least you get sort of a view. You want it just like takeoff, right? Takeoff and landings are just the reverse of each other. So you don't ever want to come in too hot on a landing.
I kind of want to get level with, since I'm already kind of straight on, why not get level with the runway?
Here, we would have to also talk about the airspace that Cairo International is, which would probably be the equivalent of a Class Bravo airspace, which is kind of like landing at LAX. So you would need permission ahead of time to go into their airspace. You would need to get the weather, and the weather's given or updated every hour unless something extreme happens. Now we can deploy flaps.
So
now
I
you
can
can
give
do
it
flap
10
1.
degrees.
Yep.
I'm giving it 10 degrees of flap, and I started lifting.
And notice we ballooned.
Yep,
so
now
you
I'm
have to
pulling,
compensate.
pushing down.
Good. And you can do flap 2 now.
Ooh, I never actually pushed past flap 1.
Well, there
really.
you go.
I know I want to be at about 65 knots.
Yep, so now notice how we're sort of just off of center line a little bit. Ailerons don't really work really well in slower configurations. So what you want to do, now you can step on that little bit of rudder just to get her over. And try to get her
yeah,
on
I'm
center
using more
line.
of the bank than I am that, so we'll
Yeah,
start
so
using...
ailerons
Here
don't
we
do
go.
a whole lot at low airspeed. So just kind of get her over. Nicely
And see,
done.
this is actually where I feel like being in cockpit might be a little bit helpful, but I honestly only toggle in and out a little bit.
Yeah, good.
Lands.
And I'm pulling up a little bit.
There you
I
go.
skipped.
That's okay. This
skipped.
counts as 2 landings.
The 2 landings, one of them was
And
great.
There you go, and then back on center line. There you go. And that's it. Yeah, I'd say good job. Your airspeed control, your RPM settings. Really interesting to see the angle of attack. And just in general, I mean, I think, you know, if you probably got into an airplane, it wouldn't feel as alien as you thought it would. So.
That's definitely not something I expected to hear.
Yeah, overall, very nicely done. You're not over controlling, you're not over banking, and that landing was. And now you know how to land with full flaps. there's definitely a lot that you can practice on in these games, and I think especially like some of my students where you talk them through certain maneuvers and they come and they practice it on here. I think it's just a really good way to solidify their training that they do in actual aircraft. I can see why the students that came in with this experience actually they could pick up things a little faster.
You know, she picked up on the controls really well. She could handle her own in this game. She can handle her own. I learned a lot of, you know, kind of little mistakes I was making. It's a very complicated machine, but when you have a competent instructor, I feel like you're in a good position.
So at the airlines, at the end of a trip, the captain will just stick out their hand and they'll say something along the lines of "Great flying with you." So it was a pleasure.
Great
I
flying
had so
with
much
you.
fun.
They shake hands. Title: Expert versus Expert.